fortunate to have amongst us Dr. Mukesh Aghi. He's the president of the US-India Business Council. He has served as chief executive and member of the board of L&T Infotech. Previously, Dr. Aghi was associated with Universitas 21 Global, world's largest consortium of research-led universities. He was the president of IBM Bharat. Dr. Aghi holds advanced management diploma from Harvard Business School. He is a PhD from Claremont Graduate University. He has another dimension to him. He has competed in over 22 marathons. And hold on, he has climbed some of the highest peaks, both in North America and Europe. So you have a mountaineer, a marathoner, and of course, a business leader amongst us, Dr. Mukesh Aghi.
Mr. Pandit, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, and I'd like to applaud the organizing committee, especially Swami Ji, who has been quite active with this event. I have 15 minutes to talk about the US-India relationship and where we see it's going also. I think the US-India relationship is defined in 3 C's, I call it. That's cultural, commerce, and China. And I think before I get into those 3 C's, and I'll define them in a very detailed fashion, I think we also have to understand the 2 mega trends which are taking place in India, which has a major impact India's partnership with the US in the midterm and the long term. I think the first trend is demographic. If you look at almost 70% of the population today in India is below the age of 27. And what we are seeing, while we talk about India's economic growth of 7.5%, but the challenge part is employment. We have roughly 1 million youth coming into the marketplace for job every month. And the job growth in India is roughly around 1.6%. That means for every 1 million people who come in, only 50% are absorbed in the employment market, and the other 50% goes into the unemployment pool. Today we have roughly 47 million Indians who are on the unemployment pool. And just think about that, every month it goes up by 500,000. And every year it goes up by 6 million. And if we don't deal with this issue in the next 10 years, then we will have a major social crisis taking place. So that's one mega trend taking place. The other which is again tied to the unemployment and aspiration, is in the next 10 years, you'll see the largest migration of humanity anywhere moving in the world, and that is 400 million Indians will move from villages to the city. That means you have to have the infrastructure, healthcare, education, security, all built up in the next 10 years. So I think keep those 2 mega trends which are taking place in the country, which has an impact on India's relationship with the US also. Let's talk about, I'll start with culture, commerce, and then China. I think from a cultural perspective, we are the 2 largest democracies in the world. I think culturally we are similar. We have opinions, open press. India ships roughly around 100,000 students every year to the US, and US sends roughly 5,000 students every year into India itself. More important is we have roughly 3.5 million Indian Americans in the US, the most affluent minority group and the most professional minority group in the United States. So I think from a cultural perspective, there are a lot of similarity. From the value system, there are a lot of similarity. As the large number of Indians who come for education go back, they become the ambassador of the US in India itself. So I think from a culture perspective, there are no other two countries which have the same value system, same vision, and same aspiration, and these two nations are. I think on a commerce side, when we look at it, India-US trade is roughly around $110 billion. And we are trying to push it to $500 billion in the next 7 years. More important is US is the only country where India has a trade surplus of $30 billion this year. The biggest export of India is IT services, roughly around, almost around $60 billion. And that is at risk as the new administration comes in because the H-1B visa will get impacted. But more important is US companies are the largest investor on FDI, foreign direct investment, into India itself. In fact, when the Prime Minister was here in Washington, D.C. in June, we put together 500 companies to have a discussion with him, but out of that, 25 companies committed to invest $45 billion in next 24 months in India. And I think that number will go up, and I think we are targeting to take the number through ESRVC to almost $100 billion of investment into India. I think these investments are important because they create jobs. And what India looks from the US is two things: technology and investment. More and more in the infrastructure space. And so we're working very closely with the large pension funds, insurance companies, to make sure their investments are long-term, 20, 30 years. And we have to applaud this government. In the last 2.5 years, it has basically wiped out roughly 1,000 archaic laws. It has moved on the GST. It has set up the bankruptcy code. It has focused on trying to bring more transparency into the environment itself. And now the big effort on demonetization, I think, which will bring roughly, we think, almost $220 billion worth of black money up into the market itself. So I think on the commerce side between two countries, we see a massive momentum. US sees India as a market not only from a technology perspective, but also from a geopolitical perspective, and that's where China comes in. I think it's important to understand China's aspiration is to be able to go back to the Middle Kingdom, to be able to have its own Silk Route, to be able to rule the world because it feels that days have come. And as US basically looks at, or I would say pivots to the Asia, starts shifting, the vacuum is going to create more and more uncertainty among nations itself. We can see that. Philippines certainly switching from the US alliance to China itself. Vietnam this morning saying that it will not move forward with TPP, which is a Trans-Pacific trade pact itself. So I think what we're seeing is the shift taking place. In that shift, in that rise of China, one thing which is going to play very strongly is that China will not tolerate the rise of India. You can go back in history and look at, century after century, year after year. And I think that's where we have to leverage United States partnership from a geopolitical perspective, from an investment perspective, that in the next 20, 30 years, India's economic growth continues without any having a sense of large imbalance between the two great countries itself. So what we believe is that we have to ensure that while we maintain strong relationship in India with China, we also keep on building a strong strategic partnership with the US. And I can tell you that if you look at Pentagon, the only country which has a rapid response team is India, where you can move it through a bureaucracy, move in weapons. We work very closely. If you look at last year, there were 54 joint exercises between US and India from the armed forces, either the Marines, the Navy, or the Air Force itself. US did not have such a large number of joint exercises with any other nation, not even the NATO, but with India itself. We have put a bill on the Hill itself, which equates India as a strategic partner, as an ally, to the same level as a NATO or Israel. And what it does is basically it moves a lot of advanced technology without going through a bureaucratic process into India itself. If you look at 4 years ago, India bought roughly around $350 million worth of US equipment. Today, it has bought roughly $50 billion worth of equipment. US is #1 supplier of all the strategic defense equipment to India itself. So I think, look at the mega trends, the 3 C's I talked about, and the question really becomes is how will this impact with the new administration coming in January 20th? Our analysis shows that this relationship will continue in an upward momentum with a strong trajectory, both from a cultural perspective, from a partnership with the new administration, from a strategic perspective, and very much from the commerce perspective. Thank you very much.